A big thanks to Koch Media for the review copy. Metro Redux were the closest to one of my favourites of all time, Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl. And what I didn't realise until now is that the two lead programmers working on that title also worked on the Metro series. Metro then successfully bridged the gap between the 2005 Dmitry Glukhovsky short novella, which then saw its namesake released 5 years later on PC, with the sequel following 3 years after. I'm sat once again in a pitch black tunnel, feverishly mashing a button to recharge my torch. Oh joy. Why? Let's find out.
Attention passengers.
The Metro Redux Bundle on Switch comes with both 2033 and Last Light, or you can buy the games individually. These are linear story-driven first-person horror FPS titles. The narrative, as per the novella, goes that post-nuclear war, Russia is struggling to regain its humanity. The surface is an irradiated wasteland, filled with hideous mutated beasts as well as other nightmarish creatures. Humans have taken to the Metro system beneath the decrepit crust for survival. Down there, in among the darkness, rats and decay, new life and stations begin to form a network. From and through this mobilization, society clings to hope. You play as Artyom, and through him you will navigate the world, moving from station to station in the Metro. There are two simultaneous plotlines, one of your own heritage and purpose, and another the great survival of all humanity. Dialogue is generally well delivered, and proximity-based chance exposition is where it really shines. Passing a conversation, you may choose to just hang around and listen. It's a bit creepy, but they don't seem to mind. Or you can move on and never learn of the plights of others in the Metro. It was these moment-to-moment secondary voyeuristic encounters that gave the Metro a sense of life.
Serge, did your dad tell you about beasts like that?
Despite its dank reality. Although linear, perhaps to a fault, story segments are often being delivered through live gameplay, with character conversations playing out naturally. It's a sorely underused delivery method, and I immediately remembered why I loved the original so much. Last Light follows on directly from the climatic ending of 2033. Now, I won't say who you play as, etc., as that might spoil the end of the first game, but I do like how they flesh out the other factions this time around, with the Nazis playing a much more central role. Yes, just like a cockroach, nuclear war can't kill fascists. I really enjoy the storytelling when it's left to the player to discover, but not so when control is ripped from your hands. It's okay in smaller quantities though, and it's nowhere near as bad as something like Call of Duty where it's constantly being removed from your control. There are just a few too many times for my liking. First things first, the Redux editions have 3 gameplay modes. Spartan, catered towards a player looking for a more action-based experience, giving you more ammo and the monsters to use it on, and the second focusing on the original's survival style play, with fewer quantities of ammunition available and tougher enemies. It's a nice inclusion and will allow for more people to enjoy the experience. Personally, I think the original survival style massively adds to the tension. Hearing the click of an empty weapon is almost as horrific as the mutants tearing towards you through the darkness. The final mode is only to be spoken in hushed whispers by the most hardcore Metro players. Ranger mode, which sees all UI elements and hints stripped away, and far fewer resources. You will die, but it sure is immersive. Both games follow a very similar first-person style of gameplay. When within areas populated by fellow survivors, you can control the camera and walk around an area, interacting with the occasional pedestrians. Shops are dotted about, and using the currency, you can then purchase and upgrade your gear. Weapon modification is more fleshed out in the sequel and allows for silencers, extended scopes, etc. to be fitted for a level of customization that just wasn't there in the first title, which also extends to the quantity and type of weapon on offer. I am a huge stealth fan, and both titles have some degree of stealth possibility, allowing for the silent headshot takedowns or up close and personal. You're given a visibility indicator in Last Light to make staying in the shadows a touch more definitive. As with most first-person shooter titles on console, the analogs control movement, and aiming with a trigger depress to aim down the sights for greater accuracy is here. You know what's coming. Gyro Controls are also here, and they are some of the best I've seen. A smart aiming dead zone is something I alluded to in our performance review of Warface, which it's gotta be said has some of the worst motion controls I've ever seen. Here then, the dead zone keeps the camera totally still when it's needed, and finite control is very easy, and whatever algorithm they're using, other companies definitely should get on board. It's been outstanding. You can customize the controls to suit your tastes with all the axes and sensitivities, tweakable to your heart's content. And these are fully gyroscopic controls as well. They don't just trigger when you look down the sights. Shooting, one of the most important aspects, is a frenetic affair, and running low on ammunition is a very real concern. While you will be facing the aforementioned mutants to a greater degree in the original game, it was the sequel's heavier emphasis on the danger of fellow humans that I enjoyed most, and it also gives back power to the player for brief periods as you become the hunter and not the hunted for a short time. Shout out to the throwing knives, probably the best weapon in the game. If your game can't have a bow and arrow, then I'll take a throwing knife. Lovely jubbly. Now, fear is probably the next element of the series. One of the core ingredients of both titles is suspense and fear. This is achieved primarily by placing the player in claustrophobic situations with limited ammunition and a task, the path of which usually leads right through Madam Hellspawn's front room. It can be hugely exhilarating when you're out of ammo and no other option available but to lunge knife out towards the ensuing floods of beasts, and usually die. Although designed to play on common fears such as darkness and claustrophobia, they only work so well because of the frequent downtimes. These are usually other stations that you'll visit or friendly comrades, but also story-driven encounters with other factions, which while also potentially dangerous, can feel like blessed relief from those damn hideous tunnels. Collectibles are always a solid way of making a player explore that little bit further than they're comfortable, and Metro employs that to good effect. If you leave the predefined path, albeit not by far and still within the game's invisible confines, you'll usually discover some ammo or other collectible. I was always the guy in Deus Ex to read every single email. Can't have been the only one, surely. Anyway, in Metro there are optional notes to find that serve to flesh out the lore of this post-apocalyptic World War III. The writing, due largely to the close work with the author of the novella, is consistently strong. When you do reach the surface, the survival element really kicks in, with filters for your gas masks being few and far between, and filth and muck clogging up your visor. Small gameplay mechanics like this, and the need to recharge the battery manually on your torch, are great additions, and while they could so easily have been irritations if handled poorly, I never felt like they hindered gameplay too much. They simply upped the ante. In terms of negatives then, I'd say that the strict linearity is the series' main drawback. You're quite literally on rails for a large chunk of the game. Branching pathways, or even the choice of which station to travel to next, would have helped, but the open world approach is definitely where the series needs to go long term, and as far as I understand it, they're already going in the right direction with the 2019 sequel. Story and gameplay score 17 out of 20. While controls are very good and they score 18 out of 20. Visually, right off the bat, I can say this is most definitely the Redux graphics and not the older version, and as such includes much improved lighting, smoke and particle effects, as well as dynamic weather and shadows, and guess what? It's all locked out at 30 FPS everywhere. Docked 30 FPS, handheld 30 FPS, which when combined with the excellent visuals provide one of the best first impressions of any Switch release thus far. Resolutions use a system from 4A Games which essentially is a form of adaptive resolution scaling that they call temporal super resolution, which happens on the fly depending on what's on screen. Now don't mistake it for standard dynamic resolution scaling though, which can see a very muddy image being produced. It's not the case here. This is one of the cleanest and most complete visual ports, perhaps since Alien Isolation. In handheld it looks incredible. Textures, lighting and motion are fluid, crisp and clear, and they run without a hitch. Docked play, partly due to the style of game, with a generally lower light and dynamic shadows which create a high contrast image, means a game that looks really good. When docked, perhaps slightly to a lesser degree than handheld, but still very good. Textures look nice and there is anti-aliasing, albeit post-processing, which has a much smaller impact on performance. Audio is good, and with spatial sound and 5.1 compatibility for those with home theatre systems. I keep telling my wife, she just won't listen. Apparently our lounge is smaller than our TV already. Upsetting. Then you'll be happy with those options. Visuals score 19 out of 20 on Switch. This is some next level optimization. And the audio is very good, only let down by a couple of more wooden voice acting moments. That scores 16 out of 20. Right off the bat, it has to be said with all of these re-releases, if you're not interested in handheld play, then buy this on PS4, it's a quarter of the price. With that out the way, let's see what it has to offer. The first win for the developers was making this physically available at launch as a double pack, which I've already found on base.com for less than the RRP, so the potential for a bargain's already here. plus the entire 2 games and all the DLC are on one cart. Hell yeah, that is delightful. You've got 2 campaigns, all of that DLC as I mentioned. You've got the Metro Redux, which includes the 2 unique playstyles and the Ranger mode, and all in all, that's enough to keep you busy for a while. To complete both of these games and do a deal of exploration for secrets, you're looking at around about 25 to 35 hours, but factor in the different modes I mentioned and all the DLC, then you can add another 10 to 15 on top of that. Whether bought individually or standalone, I can't help but think they've opted for a tiny bit too high a price. As is though, there's a lot of value and the effort has more than been made in bringing what have been quite buggy titles historically on PC to the Nintendo Switch in buttery fashion. Definitely hats off for that. Value scores 16 out of 20.
Told me this was a flight from Mallorca. Family is returning from vacation, huh? No, I've never been to the sea. Living in Florida myself.
Final verdicts then, Metro Redux is another port I didn't expect, but that I love having on Switch. If you don't need portability, then as I say, buy it elsewhere. But if like me, you spend your time hunched in waiting rooms or at any number of wasted time life moments, it is brilliant to have it handheld. It scores an overall switch up score of 86%. Once again, a big thanks to the developer for the review copy, and to all of you who enjoy our channel, please leave comments down below and hit the like and the bell and all of that stuff. And for all things Switch, all the time, keep it switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!
What is that?